Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Accountant. Today, we'll be talking about the role of the accountant in digital transformation. And I'm joined by Fozia Muddassir, private client tax partner and digital transformation lead at Reddy Siddiqui LLP. Fozia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Thanks for being here. And before we get into all stuff about digital transformation, I'd love for you to tell me a bit more about your career background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, believe it or not, I didn't grow up wanting to be an accountant, despite my father being a chartered accountant. It was one of those I'm never going to be what my parents are. I think I was a scientist at heart. I think I still am. So I'm not geeky in terms of tech, but I am very curious and I'm sort of process driven a lot. So I actually had a science degree, was almost on the verge of accepting a PhD in research. But then at that point, I think my father kind of convinced me that actually accountancy is a great profession for women, at which point I thought, let me try it. And in those days, there was actually, we're talking sort of very early 90s, where accountancy process was still very paper driven. So you were doing analysis on an 8-column piece of paper, you were doing extended trial balances, you were cross-casting, and then you would give it to the secretary to actually type a set of accounts. So it was very archaic. So that bit of it was quite boring. And what I found as things progressed, almost the tech or the IT at home was developing at a faster pace, and it almost felt like you went into the office and you were suddenly in the olden days. It was very old school. But you couldn't really say things because it was the way that things were done. Sage, obviously the absolute, I think cornerstone for most firms at that time. So we had Sage Payroll, but we actually had Sage DOS. I remember the transition. That was actually 8 months pregnant, had gone for a checkup in the hospital, and it turned out the baby was wrong way up. So this is relevant to you, Mike, because I know you're just a new dad. So things like that happen. And what I told the doctor is, can I please go back and at least get some clothes if you want me to stay in hospital for about 10 days before the baby gets delivered? And he said, yes. So obviously what I did the beeline straight to the office, grabbed my massive Sage book of the conversion from DOS to Windows. And I spent the next 8 days in hospital waiting for the baby to go the right way down, whilst flicking and going through this book. So I think that was a big read, but I had 8 days of uninterrupted reading on doing that transformation from DOS to Windows. So that was fun.
So that was your sort of first introduction into transformation.
Very much so. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Digital transformation kind of sounds like a bit of not a buzzword, but like something that we don't really understand fully what it is. In some cases, it's sort of referred to as the fourth industrial revolution. What does it really mean?
Digital transformation is change. For me, it's change. It's any sort of process that you are evolving into a better, more efficient, more faster process. So that process of change has always existed in the accountancy industry. We have had to change with legislation, etc. But I think for the longest time, I think for 400 years, we were using the ledger system. So nothing really had changed up until about the 90s. I think that's when things started getting exciting in the IT side of things, in software vendors, I think started coming up. And that's when people started innovating on the IT side. So it opened up, I think, the scope for a lot of accountancy practice either to carry on doing things as they were, and we're not going to change. That was a very stuffy attitude. Or there were other ones who were coming in, and we've always been quite we've not been IT phobic as a firm. So where we found that we were using Access to actually develop our own client database, we were beta testing a lot of products at the time. So there was a new generation almost in the 90s coming into the firm, which were very, very sort of IT literate and therefore quite keen to get their sort of teeth into something better. So we started evolving quite quickly in the 90s in terms of tech. I think change, like I said, change is always difficult. Nobody really wants to change. And I think the older you get, it gets harder. And I know this. Change is the same, keeping the same status quo is comfortable. Change means uprooting something. So I think that definitely has to be a mindset within the firm to actually accept that, yes, the change is going to happen. Yes, it's going to be difficult at the beginning, but it will, you'll reap the rewards for that change a little bit later on, but there is going to be an upheaval in the first instance. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, as accountants, probably we are one of the most risk averse professions.
Yes.
And so changing stuff, fixing what isn't necessarily broken, like meets a bit of resistance. And often I think people like the principal or like the founding partner or whoever that may be is, as you say, like often of a, quite fairly into their career, could be a kind of an older person, really stuck in their ways, should we say?
Stuck in their ways. I was actually very blessed because my senior partner was my father, and he was very open. We'd suggest something and he'd say, yeah, absolutely, go for it. He was very, very open, but I know that wasn't the status quo at the time. I remember us being very proud of all our offices are computerized. That was a word then, that we use software. We use computer software as opposed to sort of paper stuff. But I think, like you said, as accountants by nature, we were very kind of stuck in our ways. The 90s actually did help to relieve a lot of that, and there was there's a period of change during that time. It's more so from the 90s and the 2000s, 2010 to it's the pace of change that has, that has really kind of gone exponential. And I think that's what we're struggling now with accountants, how much it's just the attack. It feels like a tsunami of new tech and shiny bits of thing that you need, and you need it now. So I feel that you have to kind of almost take a break from it, just enough to be able to embed something and embed it well, rather than just grab everything that's out there at the moment and jump every bandwagon that goes by.
Yeah, I mean, also, as you said, like, you're just kind of bombarded by lots of different things. How, as a practice, do you guys go about sifting out what might work for you and what might not? Like, do you kind of do a lot of demos, or do you have an idea like of what you're looking for already? Do you run things in parallel? Like, how do you kind of go about that?
So if it's a smallish add-on, we will first see what the problem is. So internally, we'll see, is there a problem? Does it need fixing? Is there a software solution that will actually fix this problem? Then at that point, we will demo a couple of things, find out what's out there. What is also a best fit, because you need it to be integrating with what you already have rather than upheavaling everything and just saying, right, this is what we're doing. Also, it's very important team-wise to actually have the team involved, and this is the people who are actually going to be working with that bit of software. I don't like a sort of top-down approach. I prefer a bottom-up approach, side by side, working with the person who's going to be actually working the software. To see what their problems are. Just because you at senior level think this, I think this is the problem. Actually, when you start talking to your team, the problem is actually slightly different to what was envisaged. So you need to actually involve them almost in the process from the beginning, in terms of, let's do the demos together. Let's have a look at which one works, because you might like a bit of it, but they hate this, and this is going to be a bigger struggle than you initially thought. So you do need a lot of team input. I don't believe it's a one-man job. The change has to be accepted and embedded across the firm, so you've got to involve everybody. Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, when you're going through these processes and you've got lots of staff, and you can kind of see long term you're going to have these efficiencies if you go through this probably quite costly process in terms of time and money. How do you think like that a smaller practice can really balance that with the cost? Because say, for example, if, in my instance, like it's a two partner firm, not many staff, we're kind of going through the motions and we're thinking, right, do you know what? This is working well enough. At what point are we going to stop and down tools and say, right, we're going to go and basically overhaul our tech stack or whatever it is? Like that is going to take maybe a few weeks worth of work, and there never seems to be a good time for that.
Yeah, there is never a good time for change. There is never a good time for change. I think you've got to, make it bite size almost, have the process of actually doing the demos, having a period of research where you actually go off, do your thing. And if it is one or two partners, then actually say which partner has the bigger appetite to actually make the change. Let them, let it be their pet project. Let them do a bit of research. So you've got to give them that freedom to actually do that. Come back and actually, even if it means, you know what, it's the way it is now is good enough, and let's just keep this. You've got to be able to shelve the whole idea essentially and say we're not doing it. Don't get so involved personally that it becomes almost an agenda for you to have that change. And if you've gone off for 2 weeks, checked out products and come back and said, actually, there's nothing, let's just carry on as we were. That's not a wasted 2 weeks. And that partner or that person shouldn't feel like they've wasted that. That is a fact-finding mission that you've been on.
For sure. And I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying about mindset and almost culture, right? You're even if you don't end up doing it, you're starting to create that mindset of we are on a mission to improve constantly, and we are on a mission to fact find and learn. And hopefully the opportunity does come along where we find the right thing, and then we can kind of make that move at a time when we feel comfortable. So it's an interesting one, especially when you're small, because, you know, small practices are so driven, monthly billing and all that kind of stuff. It's difficult to say, right, well, month 5, we're not making anything because we're dedicating it all to a transformation. That can be really, really difficult.
That is, it's a fee earner thing, isn't it? If you are a fee earner, then at what point do you stop and make that knowledge work for you? But I think knowledge is never lost. You know, if nothing, it'll help you on the second round of demoing and tech funding.
Yeah, definitely. Before off camera, we were sort of talking about accountants maybe having to be very au fait with tech and the sort of how-to about digital transformation before we're able to sort of roll it out as a service to our clients. What, how can accountancy practices best prepare before embarking on a digital transformation project, would you say?
So internally or externally? Internally. I think, like I said, you've got to have the team involvement. If people don't have buy-in within your team, it's going to fall over. And then plan. Take as much time planning, because I really think if you fail to plan, you actually plan to fail. So you've got to have time set aside for getting team involvement, team excitement, motivate them. There's light at the end of the tunnel, but be realistic in terms of timeframes and how they may not see instant, sort of benefits straight away. So you have to manage that expectation, because the fizz can run out of something very quickly. So don't sort of promise everything within a very short period of time. You've got to make them realize there's a bit of input from them to actually make this system work. Let them take ownership of it. If they feel it's their baby, they become protective of it and want to nurture this thing. So I think that's very important in terms of the team involvement, but definitely have a plan, sort of have a brain sort of dumping session, essentially, of getting the team in, saying, look, what can go wrong? And be prepared to be devil's advocate and say, look, what can go wrong? Here's the nirvana of what we want, but what if this falls over? Let's try and see if we can poke holes into this wonderful theory of how we're going to digitize or improve something.
For sure. And you sort of having been through this a number of times, what are the most common mistakes that you've seen?
I think sitting on a project too long, it almost festers. If you've promised something, or you're saying we're going to do this to your team, and then 6 months down the line, somebody turns around and says, oh, what happened to that? And you say, oh, I'll get around to it. You've already lost the momentum. So it's keeping that momentum, promising something within a set time frame, which is manageable and realistic, and actually delivering it within that set time frame.
To make sure you catch every episode, subscribe to the channel or sign up to the Sage Advice newsletter at the bottom of the page.